In anime, even those prolific anime characters will lose a battle at least once. Whether it's Goku, Ichigo, Naruto, or Luffy, at some point in time, they will be handed a loss. However, the majority of the time, when you see these main prolific characters enter into combat, you understand they're probably gonna win. And that's why none of the characters that I just listed would ever be thought of as losers. But for a story to have winners, it must also have losers. And it's those characters that today's video is all about. See, there are anime characters who lose fights. And then there's anime characters who get entire mini arcs, power-ups, speeches, and transformations for the story to just go, well, that was all fun, but you're still gonna lose now. And that type of character, well, is an entirely different type of character from the anime character who just simply loses sometimes. See, because that type of character is not just a normal loser, but a professional loser. Because the true hallmark of a professional loser in anime is not that they just never notch a win into their belt. In fact, pretty much every single person we're going to talk about today has won at least one fight. No, the reason that every single person we're going to be talking about today has had their name placed on this list is not because they've never won, but because every single time they get close to real legitimacy, every time the story gives them a new form or a new power-up, a new reason to believe that this time might be different. When the pressure gets real, they fold. And that's the key. See, what I want to rank today are not the characters with the most losses in anime, but the characters who repeatedly get the most hype and do the least with it. I don't want to talk about characters who lose once and fade into obscurity. I want to talk about characters who are constantly treated as important enough to be a part of the story, but still never cash in any real way. All that is to say, today I want to talk about the most prolific losers in anime history, because today we're talking the top 10 worst losers in anime history, ranked and explained. But before we get to chatting on losers, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional Nick video every single week, guys, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We're on to the Konoha Crush arc. The Orochimaru and Hiruzen are kicking it off. Now, it's important to note before we dive into this list that this is not a list that you want to find your name at the top of. And therefore, if you're our number 10 loser, you're not as big a loser as our number 1 loser. And thus, with that said, let's get to our number 1 spot. Coming up at number 10 on our list of anime's most prolific losers, we have Chad. Chad in the early parts of Bleach seemed like he was going to be the strongest side character ever introduced. In fact, in Bleach, he might be the cleanest example of we wanted you to believe in his strength for just 1 second before we ripped it out from under him. Because early on, Chad had everything that you could possibly want from a strength perspective. He was a ludicrously sized high schooler with a boxing background. An I-beam fell on him and it bent. He was quiet, cold, and calculating, and incredibly faithful to Ichigo as a friend. And as the universe of Bleach started to progress with its powers, as Ichigo was pulled further and further into the world of the Shinigami, Chad also saw power-ups, gaining his brazo derecha de gigante, a monstrously powerful right arm with a shield that allowed for Chad to tank attacks from some of the most powerful people in the Bleach universe. And then later on, he gets his brazo izquierda del diablo, a left arm upgrade that allowed him to tap into supposedly demonic powers. And that should have been the moment when Chad's kit was complete. An offensively focused left arm that taps into his devil powers, and a defensively focused right arm that allows for him to shield himself from basically anything. And thus it felt like when Chad unlocked his left arm abilities, there was really no reason for him not to be relevant from a power scaling perspective. See, because while Ichigo was beating down Kenpachi Zaraki in the Soul Society arc, Chad found himself across from apparently an even more intimidating foe in Shunsui. And we were led to believe that Chad could never lose. Ichigo himself says he couldn't imagine a world where Chad lost. Shunsui beats him with almost insulting ease. It's not even framed as being competitive. Chad comes in full of himself because of his new abilities and how successful they've all been in the Soul Society up until this moment, and Shunsui dispatches of him using what we now understand to be a fraction of his strength. And then the Arrancar arc does the same thing to Chad. Sure, he gets a battle against the Priviana Espada that he's barely able to eke out a victory in, which is meant to show us like, hey, look, Chad is able to bang with some of the higher ranking enemies in the Soul Society or in Hueco Mundo. I mean, if he can beat a Priviana Espada, who's to say he can't beat, a regular Espada? Well, enter Noitra Gilga, the number 5 Espada. And he cuts down Chad in one strike. And this is the kind of thing that happens over and over and over again with Chad. He gets a small victory and he takes that hype into a bigger battle where he gets dispatched easily. He gets a big upgrade that makes him feel like he's gonna be equal to somebody like Ichigo in power. I mean, after all, he is framed as one of the most important side characters in the early parts of Bleach. But then the second that he needs to do side character stuff, like win against side antagonists, he comes up short. So while Chad does get moments, he has an incredible OST, he gets power upgrades, and he occasionally wins a fight or two. When it matters, he comes up short. And that's why he's number 10 on our list. At number 9 on our list of anime's most proficient losers, we have Kuabara. See, Kuabara is one of the most lovable guys in anime, and that's why including him on this list, it kind of hurts my soul, because Yu Yu Hakusho gives Kuabara enough growth as a character and enough respect as a fighter that you keep wanting to believe that he has enough power to win this fight that he's in, even though the series time and time again proved to us that the further along we got, the further left behind Kuabara became. See, don't get it twisted. Early on in YuYu, Kuabara does have some important wins. He, after all, beats Rinku in the Dark Tournament, proving to the world and the viewers that he's a lot more than just comic relief. Not to mention, to counter Yusuke's spirit gun, he's got the spirit sword, and he's a pompadour-wearing endurance and toughness monster. It's almost impossible to get him out of a fight. Not to mention later on, he develops his Dimension Sword, an ability that raises his power level to upper A strength in the anime and upper S rank in the manga. I mean, after all, the Dimension Sword is a sword that's able to virtually cut through anything. On paper, it's one of the most broken abilities in all of Yu Yu Hakusho. The ability to cut through dimensions should be the kind of upgrade in your power that allows you to stop losing when it matters. But for Kuabara, unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Because unfortunately, Kuabara's entire character is kind of built around the idea that the audience loves him, but the power ceiling of the universe has far exceeded what he'll ever be able to achieve. See, whether it was his battle against Elder Tuguro, where he kind of awakens his spirit sword for the first time, where he swings that sword into Elder Tuguro and almost cuts him in half, but Elder Tuguro just takes the attack on account of the fact that he knows he's not in any danger. And when everyone believes that Elder Tuguro is dead and gone, he just Swiss cheeses Kuabara from the back. And I get it, Kuabara keeps getting up because, like we said, he has ridiculous endurance and stamina. But there was never a scenario in which Kuabara was going to win this fight. Not to mention when Hiei, Kurama, and Kuabara all fight against Senshui, even with his dimensional sword upgrade, Kuabara gets completely and utterly disrespected. So sure, Kuabara gets one of the coolest techniques in the series, but unfortunately it kind of solely serves as a reminder that having a broken ability doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna become one of the strongest people in the universe. So while his rare win or two are absolutely real, and his heart's determination and lovability are undeniable, his role in Yu Yu Hakusho as a professional loser is also, unfortunately, undeniable. But not all of the losers on this list come in such lovable packaging. At number 8 on our list of anime's most prolific losers, we have Yamcha. Yamcha is one of the most famous losers in anime history. In fact, when it comes to losing, Yamcha's probably the most famous loser in anime history, on account of the fact that his moment after being blown into a crater has been put into dozens, if not hundreds of other animated sequences. In fact, Yamcha's losses are so iconic that people at anime conventions sell blankets of his crater so you can lay in the middle just like him. But Yamcha wasn't always just a living meme, and that's what makes his fall into becoming a meme all the worse. Early Dragon Ball, not Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Yamcha's a real guy. He's not Goku level, he's not Master Roshi level, a legitimate martial artist and an early rival-ish figure for Goku, and somebody that the series lets you take semi-seriously. He wins matches, he has techniques like the Wolf Fang Fist and Spirit Ball, not Spirit Bomb, and thus in Dragon Ball, where he may not be the most prolific and or important character, he is a character that you do take somewhat seriously. And then and then Z happens. Because sure, there was a time in his life when he was a famous baseball player and he was lightly dating Bulma, and things were good for him. And then in Z, while battling against legitimate goblin-level threats, in the Cybermen, after defeating one of the Cybermen and believing he's the greatest to ever do it because of that, he gets suicide bombed by another one. Not only killing him, but immortalizing him into one of the most iconic poses of humiliation ever depicted in anime. And in that moment, Yamcha became a meme forever entwined to the concept of loss. And the franchise never really lets him recover from that. He dated Bulma for 15 years. They started dating when they were teenagers. And then Vegeta comes down, steals his girl, he gets blown up by a legitimate goon, and he's treated like a relic for the rest of Z and Super. As power creep makes the Dragon Ball universe more and more ridiculously powerful, Yamcha goes from a guy who could legitimately stand with the rest of the Z fighters to an early cast member who didn't stand a shot at surviving the power inflation of his universe. But he's not even the worst loser from Dragon Ball, and neither is our number 7 spot. Coming up at number 7 on our list of anime's most prolific losers, we have Tien. This one hurts me personally a lot because growing up, Tien was my favorite Dragon Ball character. I liked his design, I liked the Tri-Beam, I liked that he had a little cat friend. But unfortunately, the older I get, the more I realize he undeniably belongs on this list. See, because just like with Yamcha, early Tien was a legitimate threat, and he has some legitimate wins under his belt. I mean, sure, he was an adult fighting a child. And sure, Goku didn't know about his Dodon Ray, but he wins the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai over Goku, giving him actual rival energy. He was strong, he had discipline, technique, his Tri-Beam, Solar Flare, his multi-arm technique, and real martial arts identity. In Dragon Ball, Tien mattered. But when Goku figures out how to counter his multi-arm technique, Goku wins, and thus starts a kind of vicious cycle of Tien losing grip of relevancy, really cemented by his death in a battle against Nappa. Because not only does Nappa punch off Tien's arm, but after making a promise to protect Gohan, Tien puts everything that he has, the entirety of his life force, into a Tri-Beam attack to Nappa that does a grand total of nothing, but Tien literally overexerts himself to death. And now I get it, some of you are gonna say, oh, but Nick, what about his Neo Tri-Beam against Semi-Perfect Cell? Shooting his triangles into squares and keeping Cell down at the bottom. Listen, that is one of the greatest stall sequences in all of Dragon Ball, not even just Dragon Ball Z. Tien dropping Tri-Beam after Tri-Beam after Tri-Beam to keep Cell pushed down to the ground to hold him off for just a couple of minutes, screaming himself to the edge of death just to give all of the other Z fighters enough time to prepare. But fundamentally, look at what that moment actually is. It's not Tien re-entering the elite. It's not even Tien being able to injure Cell. It's just Tien buying time. And slowly but surely, Tien fades into obscurity. And even when he does show back up, showing up in the Tournament of Power and Dragon Ball Super, he does nothing of consequence, which truly displayed to us and all Super fans that nothing meaningful was going to be done to restore Tien at really any given moment. He has rare wins, he has legendary moments, but when pretty much the only thing you're remembered for by most fans is using your iconic attack to stall a not even complete version of Cell, well, that's pretty indicative of what your career in Dragon Ball has looked like. But at least Tien is remembered for something positive. That's not something we could say for our number 6 spot. At number 6 on our list of anime's most prolific losers, we have Renji. Renji is the god emperor of fake momentum. Bleach is in a constant state of spoon-feeding Renji aura and power-ups, just enough to the point where it's able to trick viewers into believing that maybe this time is gonna be different from Renji, but it never is. He's got a cool design, he's one of Ichigo's closest friends in the Sarate, he's loyal, he's tragically connected to Rukia, he has captain-level aspirations, and on account of the fact that he has a Bankai, technically captain-level abilities. His Shikai, Zabimaru, is one of the most iconic weapons in the entirety of the Bleach franchise, and while his Bankai, Hihiyo Zabimaru, isn't necessarily all that different from his Shikai, it's still supposed to be a major step up in his power. I mean, he's got a big skeletal serpent for a sword. Everything about Renji, outside of his eyebrows, points to the idea he should be an important character. And yet what happens in the first real important fight he's ever placed into? Well, while trying to save Rukia in the Soul Society arc, he is beaten badly by Byakuya. But before this, when he fought against Ichigo, who is a brand new Shinigami, mind you, he loses. When he tries to fight Aizen in the Soul Society arc, he loses. When he fights against Ilfort Grans, a fraction of Grimjow, he loses. Then when he fights against one of the weakest Espada, Poro, he loses. And then they just keep putting him in crazier and crazier fights. He fights against Yami. In the Thousand Blood War arc, he fights against Gerard Valkyrie, one of the strongest people in the universe, and then he fights against Yahaba. But like, the story wants you to believe that he belongs in these fights, because during the Royal Guard training arc, he gets his Suo Zabimaru, his true Bankai, a Bankai more powerful than regular Bankai. And while yes, he beats Masked Masculine, and that's a real win, all it really accomplished is giving the S-Shrift to Yahaba. And thus, even in his wins, he just ends up powering up the most powerful guy in the universe who was gonna kill all of his Shrifts anyways. And thus, there's this pattern. Renji is time and time again introduced into meaningful conflict with enough power-ups that we believe this could be his shot. Only for Bleach to time and time again remind us that Renji is a measuring stick, meant to display exactly how powerful everybody else is. And thus, when you become the appetizer that the Sarate rolls out to figure out exactly how powerful an enemy may or may not be, that's professional losing at the highest level. But has Renji died just to be brought back to life so he could die again? No. No, that's where our number 5 entry comes in. At number 5 on our list of anime's most prolific losers, we have Krillin. Nick, there's too much Dragon Ball on here. There's a lot of losers in Dragon Ball. Now, Krillin falls into the same bucket as the other Dragon Ball characters we've listed already, but worse, obviously. See, because Krillin, like Tien, and to a lesser extent, like Yamcha, has actual utility all over Dragon Ball as a franchise. He has wins, he has brains, he has techniques, he has his Destructo Disc, which is one of the most absurdly effective killing abilities in all of Dragon Ball, so long as the plot remembers that. I mean, Krillin could have killed Nappa. Nappa thought he was going to be able to flick away Krillin's Destructo Disc without Vegeta yelling out to him to dodge. Nappa would have been cut in half. And yet, unfortunately, even though Krillin was there with Goku in the early days of martial arts training and was frequently shown to be close to Goku in strength, so much so that just by observing Master Roshi and Goku, he also learned the Kamehameha to the point where he was able to use it in combat against Chiatsu without formally training in it before. And yet, even though this is a guy who can learn an ability that was used to blow up the moon just by watching somebody else use it, he is constantly disrespected by the plot. I mean, he dies to a guy named Tambourine by lightly kicking him in the forehead. Like, when you're watching this fight, you're like, oh man, Krillin can't land a punch on this guy. And then we just cut to Krillin's shadow and we see Tambourine like lightly flick his forehead. And then Krillin just falls over and you're like, ah, he's unconscious. Nope. Dead. But don't worry, that's what the Dragon Balls are for. We're gonna wish Krillin back to life. So, you know, he can get brutalized by Recoome on Namek. But don't worry, he survives this one. And he even gets to fight Recoome's boss, a non-perfect version of Frieza, who impales him with one of his horns, but Krillin survives. You know, that is until Frieza throws him and blows him up. And while that death obviously matters because Krillin getting killed for the second time in front of Goku is what triggers him to unlock Super Saiyan, this is what makes Krillin such a prolific loser. His losses aren't just throwaway moments. They are integral plot points. The angriest fight that we see from Goku in all of Dragon Ball is his battle against Tambourine. And without Frieza killing Krillin, we may have never gotten Super Saiyan, unless the plot essentially treats Krillin as Kenny from South Park. Kill him for comedic and/or plot effect. And yeah, he gets some wins. He beats some of the Cybermen. He spars with Super Saiyan Blue Goku and Super. But none of that changes the underlying truth. When Dragon Ball wants a recognizable, respected, and emotionally valuable character to serve as an example, well, Krillin's always there. And that's not the kind of legacy you want to have in a universe that keeps introducing stronger and stronger foes. Well, let's take a step away from Dragon Ball for the moment and go to a maybe less serious and/or more serious martial arts anime. And number 4 on our list of anime's most prolific losers, we have Jack Hanma. See, Jack Hanma is what happens when a series turns a character into self-destruction incarnate. See, Jack Hanma's whole image is built around the idea of sacrifice. He's Yujiro Hanma's son, just like Baki. However, he doesn't have Baki's innate martial arts experience, and thus he has to find his strength in other ways. And those other ways stop short of literally nothing. See, because whether it's drugs, extreme training, body modifications, fighting people, starving himself, fighting dirty, Jack will do anything to get 1 inch closer to standing at the top. And thus every time Jack shows up, our instinct is to back up. An imposing 8-foot-tall man with titanium teeth who will mutilate himself to any degree to be victorious in battle. And thus we, like Jack, believe that eventually, maybe this next upgrade will push him into the upper echelons of the Baki universe. You keep thinking eventually these augmentations, these drugs, these new muscles will mean something permanently. Eventually, this level of commitment has to force the story to respect him. Except it doesn't. Jack does get some wins. In the Maximum Tournament arc, he beats Sergio Silva and Kengo Misaki, so he can go on to the finals to fight against his brother, Baki, who he loses to. And unfortunately for Jack, he's mostly remembered for these losses. See, because whether it's losing to his brother, Baki, or his father, Yujiro, or the prehistoric man, Pickle, twice, it feels like when Jack Hanma enters into a battle, not only does he lose, but he loses in horrific fashion. Whether that's having his teeth ripped out, his jaw knocked off. When Jack loses, he loses hard. And while that is kind of turning around in the manga right now, I'm sure a lot of you aren't reading the Baki manga. And thus when people have conversations around Jack Hanma, Jack, rather than being an impressive fighter, turns into somebody whose suffering is impressive, but their combat prowess isn't. Even when he creates his own bite-centric martial arts style, Gyodo, Jack is treated less like, oh my god, Jack has finally ascended to the level of power he needs, and more like, oh, Jack's found a new way to lose horrifically. And that's why he's so high on this list, because very few of the other characters on this list work as hard as Jack Hanma does to achieve as little as Jack Hanma does. But if we're talking about giants on giant losing streaks, we can't have that conversation without our number 3 spot. And number 3 on our list of anime's most prolific losers, we have Reiner Braun. See, Reiner is a bit different from the other entries on this list because him losing is kind of the point, but that doesn't save him from being added onto this list. If anything, it makes him stronger as a candidate. So the Armored Titan should be one of the most oppressive forces in all of Attack on Titan. And objectively, in the earliest days of Attack on Titan, it is. I mean, after all, as the Armored Titan, Reiner was able to lower his shoulder and run through Paradise's walls. And fundamentally, the Armored Titan should be almost unkillable, with the rare exception of possibly other Titan shifters. And yet Reiner as the Armored Titan is able to cover his nape in impenetrable armor. And thus for a long while, the Armored Titan seemingly represents the zenith of power. And yet, as they say, those at the top truly have the furthest to fall. Reiner spends pretty much the entirety of Attack on Titan as a story, slowly descending from that mountaintop he climbed his way up to in just the first couple of episodes. See, because when Reiner and Eren do come fist to fist in their Titan-shifted forms, Eren, as the Attack Titan who doesn't have the advantage of armor, is able to out-wrestle Reiner, the person who taught him how to wrestle. And without Bertholdt throwing half of the Colossal Titan on top of him, in this moment right here, Reiner would have died. But it's not even just Titan shifters that stand a chance against Reiner. The scouts create Thunder Spears after it becomes clear as Reiner runs away with Eren that they won't be able to cut through his armor, and thus immediately his armor becomes irrelevant. And in the Battle of Libero, when he was needed to protect the Marleyan leaders, Eren defeats him in mere seconds, treating him as a minor inconvenience. In fact, the Claw Titan and the Warhammer Titan, who were substantially newer characters to the story, stood a better chance against Eren than Reiner ever did. Not to mention when he was trying to save Annie from Zeke, Zeke took him down rather easily with the Beast Titan transformation, and in the War for Paradise arc, his armor was rendered useless by human artillery. Now, unlike a lot of the other characters on this list, Reiner does have some rare wins that mean a lot. His help is essential in the stopping of the rumbling. He's not useless, he survives impossible situations, and his fall from grace is intentional. It's supposed to display the split personality that he has between Reiner and the soldier, as he hides away all of the bad deeds he's committed to never think about them, but as those thoughts and all of the lives he's taken begin to creep into his brain, he's supposed to be shown faltering, which he does. However, it's undeniable that the story turns him from a terrifying antagonist into a walking collapse, a symbol of PTSD. And rather beautifully, this coincides with the armor he has on his Titan losing all of its value. As when Reiner's armor represented the true height of Titan transformations, that was supposed to represent his ability to compartmentalize all of the terrible deeds he was doing. But still, his losses stack up, which is why he's number 3 on our list. But unfortunately, even almost Kurt Cobaining yourself doesn't compare to the true greatest loser in all of Dragon Ball, who we have coming up at number 2. At number 2 on our list of anime's most prolific losers, we have Vegeta. Yeah, yeesh, can feel the comments already. Vegeta is the final boss of Almost. He is the archetype that characters like Renji have been studying for years. Nobody in anime has had more high-level hype assigned to them while still building such an insane resume of public failure. And that's what makes Vegeta so special. Vegeta's not a loser because he's weak. Vegeta is a loser because he spent his entire career an inch away from validation and was never able to grab it. He gets all the forms: Super Saiyan 1, Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 3, Super Saiyan Blue, Super Saiyan God. When Goku gets Ultra Instinct, he gets Ultra Ego. He gets all of the speeches, his Majin arc, all of the pride. And all of this is the moment where Vegeta finally comes out victorious, setup, and time and time and time and time and time again he comes up short. Grade 8 Vegeta, after effortlessly dispatching of one of the last remaining Saiyans of all time in Nappa, loses to a Kaioken Goku and a bean farmer with a sword. Namek Vegeta spends the entire arc talking about how Frieza decimated his people and enslaved them for generations, pushing himself to higher and higher and higher levels of strength just to get Well, humiliated by Frieza. Watching Goku achieve something in Super Saiyan that he, as the Prince of Saiyans, absolutely should have achieved before Goku. Android 18 breaks his arms and his ego. And then he gets Super Saiyan and becomes Super Vegeta, which gives him such a boost in his power and a hit of ego that he allows for Cell to reach his perfect form, which allows for Cell to gain a level of power that's far beyond that of Super Vegeta. Majin Vegeta gives one of the best speeches in the history of anime and goes out in one of the flashiest, most iconic moments in all of anime history, and he can't even defeat the weakest version of Boo. And then Super gives him Super Saiyan Blue and Ultra Ego, and finally it feels like Vegeta's gonna cash in all of the goodwill he's been stashing up for years, and he doesn't do that. And like, he does beat Zarbon and Ginyu and Toppo. Fundamentally, Vegeta's role in Dragon Ball is, well, to get beaten up while we wait for Goku to unlock a new form, most iconically betrayed by his 1-minute scene. But even Vegeta doesn't take the title of anime's most prolific loser. No, because at least Vegeta's still important to his story, unlike our number 1 entry. Because coming up at number 1 on our list of anime's most prolific losers, we have Kiba. Now, this is the most painful spot on this list for me, because growing up, Kiba was my favorite character. And then that fart derailed his whole career. See, Kiba believes, maybe more than anybody else with the possible exception of Naruto, that he is the greatest thing to ever happen. And that is unfortunately the entire issue. He not only carries himself like he believes he is a genuine rival to Sasuke, Naruto, and Neji, but also he staunchly believes that one day he will be the Hokage. And yet the actual results that Kiba is able to scrounge up never reflect that image in the slightest. See, Kiba's most famous early fight in Naruto is his battle against Naruto in the preliminary matches of the Chunin exams. A fight that, for all intents and purposes, Kiba should have won. I mean, after all, it was a 2v1. Kiba had Akamaru, he had Man-Beast transformation, he had Fang over Fang, and at that time, Fang over Fang was one of the deadliest offensive ninjutsu that a genin had access to. And yet, through just a couple of fancy transformation jutsu techniques, Naruto's not only able to trick Kiba into knocking out Akamaru, but he's also able to fart in his face, stunning him for long enough so he can hit him with an Uzumaki barrage. The first time we ever see that technique. And this isn't some endgame Naruto that defeats Kiba. This is silly, goofy, non-Jiraiya trained Naruto. The Naruto who's barely holding it together. And that's a bad look for somebody who wants to be the Hokage. And yet Kiba goes out into the world and he trains. He makes his 2-headed wolf formations. He gains more techniques. He empowers his Fang over Fang. And that fuels his ego. It fuels his desire to become Hokage. And yet, even with months to train between the preliminaries and the Sasuke retrieval arc, when Kiba for some reason finds himself in a battle against the leader of the Sound Village 4, not only does he stand no chance whatsoever, but the only way that he's able to injure Sokka and Ukon is by stabbing himself. And while Kiba may have been able to kill Sokka and Ukon at the cost of his own life, it wasn't until Kankuro flew onto the scene with his puppets that Kiba was going to be able to survive this deadly encounter. And thus, once again, Kiba is put in a situation where he gains a prolific loss. And that is effectively the last thing he ever does within the confines of the story. But that never stops his confidence. Well, yes, pretty much the most important thing that Kiba does after this is helping to track down Itachi with a group of 9 or so ninja. Still, every time we see Kiba, he has aspirations of becoming the Hokage, something we all know he cannot do. I mean, this is a guy who has to expend chakra to run on all fours, a guy who taught Akamaru how to piss on people. He has no real reason to have any of this confidence, and yet he does. And thus, to me, that's what makes him our true number 1 loser. The guy with the most hype, the most transformation, the most speeches, the most aspirations, who made public failure their entire persona. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. If you had to make a list of the most prolific losers in anime history, who would you say they are and why? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, shoulders day, baby.